Beneath the muddy Fraser River, a McDonald's future still sits tilted, with broken windows above water and an abandoned dining room below the cold surface. The strangest part is not that McBarge sank, but that it spent nearly 40 years becoming too famous to save and too awkward to use. It began as a corporate spectacle, a floating restaurant meant to prove that fast food could look futuristic, mobile, glamorous, and almost civic. By 2026, that promise had become a half-submerged wreck, trapped between nostalgia, waterfront money, legal confusion, and the slow violence of time. Its official name was Friendship 500, though almost everyone remembers it by the nickname that made the entire story sound impossible from the start. McBarge was built for Expo 86 in Vancouver, a world fair obsessed with transportation, technology, architecture, spectacle, and visions of tomorrow. McDonald's did not want an ordinary counter inside that fair, because Expo demanded a restaurant that felt like part of the future itself. So the company helped create a floating location that could serve crowds from the water and suggest a new kind of portable waterfront prosperity. The business logic seemed simple enough because a restaurant on a barge could theoretically move wherever docks, power, crowds, and permits existed. For visitors, it was more than a place to eat, because stepping aboard made a familiar American brand feel briefly extraordinary and theatrical. The problem was hidden inside the success because the floating McDonald's worked beautifully as a spectacle but poorly as a permanent business model. When Expo 86 closed in October, the crowds vanished, the fairgrounds shifted, and the barge became an expensive question without customers or momentum. Vancouver officials did not want the shuttered structure remaining in False Creek while valuable waterfront land moved toward a much larger redevelopment. McDonald's reportedly faced major annual costs for maintenance and security, while the closed restaurant produced no sales, no traffic, and no useful purpose. The gangways came off, the dining room went dark, and a restaurant built to move was finally towed away from its public stage. It was anchored in Board Inlet, where the windows weathered, the paint faded, and a corporate showcase became a strange local curiosity. That was the first real collapse, not underwater, but in meaning, when McBarge stopped being commerce and became abandoned corporate spectacle. People photographed it from boats and shorelines, wondering how something so public, expensive, recognizable, and once celebrated could simply remain unused. The answer was not one villain or one scandal, but a slow collision between ownership, regulations, waterfront economics, fading momentum, and time. In 1999, developer Howard Meakin acquired the barge and saw something more valuable than scrap metal inside its strange floating silhouette. Meakin had worked around historic Vancouver spaces, and he appeared to understand that McBarge had become a kind of accidental waterfront landmark. Yet landmarks need land, money, permission, and partners, and the floating restaurant had none of those in reliable enough supply. Different ideas surfaced over the years, from commercial reuse to public attractions, but every plan had to face the same hard waterfront question. Where could a massive floating relic legally sit long enough to justify the cost of bringing it back to life again? The richer and more restricted Vancouver's waterfront became, the more difficult it was to place a structure built for another economic era. That contradiction made McBarge unforgettable, because everyone seemed to recognize it, but recognition alone could not pay for restoration or preservation. In 2015, the barge left Board Inlet and was moved to Maple Ridge, where hope briefly returned to the story again. At the Workyard, much of the old restaurant interior was stripped away, leaving a hollow shell waiting for reinvention and another chance. By 2017, a new plan promised to transform McBarge into the Deep Ocean Discovery Center, tied to undersea exploration, science, and education. The idea had a strange poetry, turning a floating fast food relic into a public attraction about the mysteries beneath the ocean. Phil Knighton, the Canadian deep-sea inventor connected to the project, gave the proposal a serious scientific identity beyond nostalgia and curiosity. For a moment, the barge seemed ready to escape abandonment, with sponsors, publicity, and a new civic purpose all within reach. That is why stories like this belong on Fortunes and Ruins, where money, ambition, and forgotten structures reveal what progress leaves behind. Subscribe for more cinematic stories about lost fortunes, failed promises, and the ruins still hiding across North American history in plain sight. But big waterfront dreams often die quietly, not through one dramatic rejection, but through delays, missing partners, and announcements that never become construction. By 2021, the museum plan was still discussed, yet the essential problem remained finding a legal, valuable, practical, and permanent home. Inside the shell, old architectural details survived, including railings, wide windows, kitchen traces, ceiling lights, and hints of the restaurant it once was. Around those traces were rust, cracked glass, missing panels, exposed openings, and the unmistakable damage caused by years of waiting and weather. Meakin's vision may have been sincere, but waiting for the perfect deal became a dangerous strategy for a structure still on water. In May 2023, Phil Knighton died, and the proposed ocean discovery concept lost one of its most important symbolic figures and advocates. After that, public momentum faded further, and McBarge looked less like a future museum than a postponed problem beside the river. By early 2025, the exterior had visibly worsened, with staining, open doors, missing windows, loose panels, and signs of structural neglect. Most alarming was the lean, because a famous floating ruin still depends on air, balance, maintenance, hull integrity, and physics. On March 26, 2025, McBarge quietly took on water and partially capsized along the banks of the Fraser River. The morning image was surreal, with part of the former restaurant above the surface and much of its body swallowed below the waterline. News crews returned, but the story had changed from possible restoration to responsibility, removal, jurisdiction, ownership, and who would pay. Transport Canada said it was trying to identify the owner, while local businesses and officials wanted the wreck dealt with quickly. Because the sinking was not considered an immediate environmental or navigational hazard, the pressure for fast removal became complicated, expensive, and slow. On April 30, 2025, Howard Meakin died, leaving behind a respected development life and one highly visible unfinished waterfront dream. The barge was now more than abandoned, because it seemed caught between memory, bureaucracy, unclear responsibility, expensive cleanup, and public frustration. Someone may eventually remove it, but refloating McBarge as a working attraction appears less likely with every season underwater. The tragedy is that the restaurant served the public for only months, then spent decades famous for never serving anyone again. It began as proof that fast food could feel futuristic, then became proof that novelty can outlive the plan behind it. What remains is not a restaurant, not a museum, and not quite a monument, but a corporate dream stuck in sediment. Keep following Fortunes and Ruins for more forgotten stories where wealth builds strange promises, then time reveals what they were worth. In the end, McBarge leaves one final image: golden arches gone, windows broken, and a fast food future sinking beneath gray water.